Breaking tonight, did the Obama administration just pick a side in the Israeli-Palestinian war, and was it the wrong one? Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. The FAA today extended its ban on all flights to Tel Aviv for another 24 hours. A move Hamas, which the United States says is a terrorist group, hailed as a great victory. The ban was extended despite the fact that there is no similar ban in place on flights over Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, not even one over Ukraine, where a commercial airliner was just shot down. Now Texas GOP Senator Ted Cruz is suggesting this is a de facto boycott of Israel, offered at the same time we are sending $47 million in aid to Gaza, which is controlled by that terrorist group, Hamas. Andrew McCarthy is a former federal prosecutor, National Review contributing editor and author of Faithless Execution, building the political case for Obama's impeachment. Andy, Senator Cruz went a step further just a couple of hours ago, saying he wants to put a hold on all State Department nominees until the White House answers his questions, which zero in on whether they had a hand in the FAA's decision and whether this is, in effect, a boycott of Israel. Is it the right move?
Oh, it's absolutely the right move. It's certainly the right move for him to use what leverage he has to get answers out of the White House. And the substantive move underneath it, absolutely the right move.
What you say that the White House, the administration should not be sending John Kerry over there. They should not be demanding a ceasefire. They should be letting Israel do what it's doing, right, because we need Israel to win.
Yes, Hamas is not only Israel's enemy, it's part of the global jihad. It's our enemy. And for those who actually care about peace in the Middle East, who want to have a two-state solution, the only chance that you have for that, and I'm a skeptic about whether it's even possible under these circumstances, but the only chance you have is if Hamas loses and if the will of the global jihad is broken. If that doesn't happen, you cannot have the conditions for an enduring peace of any kind.
So this is akin to the United States being at war with al-Qaeda and the United States making progress on that war with al-Qaeda and being on the precipice of defeating al-Qaeda, and then maybe our allies in Europe saying, no, we need a ceasefire, take your heel off of the neck of the al-Qaeda snake. When we're saying, no, we want to eliminate them.
Yes, and in this instance, it's in many ways worse because Israel's a smaller country, and what we've learned over the last 2 weeks is they have a highly sophisticated, Hamas does, network of tunnels running all through Israel, which are designed for terrorist attacks, for abductions, and for strategic bombings throughout Israel.
And just this past week, the Israelis caught some Palestinians wearing Israeli guard uniforms trying to sneak into Israel, and they found some very telling items on those Palestinians, on those Hamas operatives. Yeah,
things like handcuffs and sedatives and things to put people out. And it's clear that they were planning abductions. And look, I'm a big fan of the way Israel does its national security, but I think one of the mistakes it makes is basically bartering with terrorists, you know, releasing terrorists in order to get some of its own people back.
They released 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for one Israeli, Gilad Shalit.
Right, and look at what the incentive has done. Basically, what Hamas is planning to do, among other things, is abductions because they know that that gives them great leverage against Israel.
In the meantime, they found one of these tunnels leading underneath a kindergarten. With, you know, the suggestion is they were going to bomb a kindergarten, that these Gaza, these Hamas operatives were going to bomb an Israeli kindergarten.
There's a certain symmetry to it because they bomb from kindergartens in Gaza. So,
okay, which leads me to my next question. Because you cited with approval an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal from the other day where the author was arguing that you could make the case that some of these Palestinian civilian deaths we're seeing aren't really true civilians because these are people who have chosen in some part to house terrorists, to house their weapons, to house their bombs, and therefore can you really call yourself a civilian? The critics of the professor who wrote that article, he's a fellow, I think, at NYU, who wrote that op-ed, say that he sounds like Osama bin Laden and that for you to cite him with authority makes everyone who is supporting him adopting the argument of terrorists, which is, well, it was fair of us to bomb the World Trade Center on 9/11 and kill civilians because really all Americans have blood on their hands because they support their government's policies.
No, that's preposterous. Hamas was elected by the Palestinian people. So they chose Hamas, and they chose Hamas under circumstances where Hamas exists for one reason and one reason only, which is to eliminate Israel.
That is in Hamas's charter. That is
right.
that is a statement of fact.
No, this isn't my opinion.
Right.
They not only say that, they want you to know that. They want Israel to know that. Mm-hmm. So that is what the Palestinians chose.
Okay, but so now accepting that,
right.
How can you still look at the death of children on, television, because the Israelis have been far more effective militarily than the Palestinians have, and say we shouldn't be concerned about it? It shouldn't be something the American people are alarmed by.
I think it overstates it to say we shouldn't be concerned about it. Mm-hmm. But, the fact of the matter is, when you have a war, you are allowed under the laws of war to attack strategic military targets. And if strategic military targets include places where the enemy is not only firing at you, but using human shields to try to discourage you from retaliation, you have to be able to retaliate. That's part of the reason war is so horrible and we hate it. But that is the way war has to be fought.
And Israel gives advance notice of the specific target that's going to go after.
Unlike us in many circumstances.
Andy McCarthy, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Megan.
Joining me now to react, Harris Zafar, national spokesperson for Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA, and author of Demystifying Islam, Tackling the Tough Questions. Sir, thank you very much for being here. Let me get you to respond to the last point I was just talking to Andy McCarthy about the fact that Hamas is actually using civilians to hide its weaponry, its rockets, and that accounts for many of the civilian deaths we've seen thus far.
Well, Megan, the contention that the victims have themselves to blame for their indiscriminate targeted murder is not only insensitive, it's dangerous and myopic. Look, the political struggle for control over a stateless society is complicated, and it has indeed yielded a very powerful group in Hamas. And yes, they commit nefarious acts. And yes, those acts must be condemned. But no, they do not embody the ambitions or the desires of a subjugated and an occupied people who have largely only ever seen war, which is why the rhetoric of Mr.
But then why did the Palestinians elect Hamas? Hamas was elected. They run Gaza. The Palestinians chose them. And now it's a united government. And so people look at Hamas and say they are the Palestinians and the Palestinians are Hamas.
And that's why Mr. McCarthy is surprisingly dismissive of that argument, because that's exactly 100%, Megan, the argument that was made from Osama bin Laden, that you elected your president, you elected your people in authority in the United States, so you as Americans have forfeited the rights to be considered protected civilians, which is why we'll attack you. It's exactly the same thing. So we cannot lower our standards to take the same stance of a known terrorist who we all wanted to be removed.
So the rhetoric doesn't have in its constitution a stated mission of destroying another country. I mean, the Hamas charter specifically says all Israelis must die.
Megan, instead of what Mr. McCarthy has argued, which is we need to, at the end of the day, win against Hamas, the bottom line is, what is our goal? I would argue that our goal is supposed to be to establish peace. And that's why we have to understand killing children.
But let me get
that. Hold on. No, killing children is not going to establish peace anywhere. So when we say that we want to win, it's not a win-lose. This is about protecting peace in that society.
Okay, I get that. But listen, but the point I was trying to make with him is that the United States, our government, says that Hamas is a terrorist group. And when you read the Hamas charter, you understand why. I mean, they sound worse than Adolf Hitler in terms of what they want to do to the Jews and to the Israeli state. So why wouldn't we want to see our ally, Israel, defeat Hamas? Why would we want to call a truce in the middle of a war that Israel appears to be winning?
How are we trying to, quote unquote, and to use your words and Mr. McCarthy's and the rhetoric of Mr. Rosenbaum, win? If you're winning by causing incredibly large amounts of civilian casualties, you can't hide behind this term collateral damage. You have to call it what it is. It's murder. Over 500 people, 75% of which, Megan, are civilians. That's not winning a war, which is why probably the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights has said that Israel is teetering on the brink of war crimes and violating international.
The UN has its thumb on the scale.
Well, everyone has its own views, but the bottom line is, how are we protecting innocent human lives? And as the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, as Muslims who believe in that Messiah, under the divine leadership of the Caliph, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, our call is to protect human lives, and you're not going to do that with the view of winning.
Let me ask you very quickly before I go, because it's very well documented that Hamas is using places like kindergartens, schools, places that are otherwise safe and normally are used to house children, to shield its weaponry and from which to launch rocket attacks. I mean, how is Hamas not to blame for those civilian deaths?
I think you'll remember in the beginning of this conversation I said that indeed Hamas has committed nefarious attacks and they need to be condemned. I'm not here as a pro-Hamas advocate. You know that, Megan. So what I'm here to say is both sides, I'm a religious man, both sides have violated the laws of their own faith, and so we can't continue to defend one side versus the other. We have to admit that where both sides are committing mistakes, and we have to say that the disproportionate response that we've seen from one side to the other is wholly unjust. But both sides are at fault, and both need to protect human lives. That's the only way we're going to get peace. Peace is with justice. It's not with wars. You're not going to get peace by killing more children.
Harris, thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
I still have Andy McCarthy here. I don't know if I can go back to him just for a quick. Can I go back to him just for one? Do you just want to quickly respond to that?
Yeah, sure. I think the one thing I'd say is, under the laws of war, when you have a declared war, when you kill somebody, it's not a murder. It's not the same thing. You know, he's suggesting that when Israel conducts military attacks in its own defense, that's murder. That's not. If they're hitting legitimate military targets, it's true that collateral damage is a tragedy, but the fact of the matter is, it's not murder. It's self-defense.
Good debate. Thank you both so much for being here.